So now the Torah, dealing with the early prophets, dealing with the life and times of our king, King David. King David is not in a celestial world, he's in this one. And he's at the bottom of all of it. He is actually building the world as we know, that we also listen to his Tehillim, to his psalms, songs that he wrote, the preparation of everything that he put together. So all of this is before us, but now we're getting a bird's eye view of life inside of the king's palace and his family. And specifically, we're talking about the time of his son, Avshalom, who killed his brother, Amnon, because the brother, these are all royal people, had seduced or raped his half-sister, which was Avshalom's complete full sister. And then he hated her, and then we have a whole sequence of palace schmutz. So we go on, and Avshalom was banned, or he took himself away, and the king brought him back. We heard his story. It was a little unusual story. I didn't really quite follow how her words led to the idea of Avshalom. She said that her one son killed another, which is what happened to David HaMelech's sons. And the blood avengers, which I guess would be all those around the king, wanted to kill the son who murdered his brother. Or perhaps it wasn't a murder, but in this case, it was a murder. After listening to this story, he pieced together that Yoav was really behind this. Yoav is the general, the 5-star general of the king's army. And he brought Avshalom back, but he refused to see him. And that's where our story takes place now. Now, in the way that the English translation works here is not perfect, but all of it gives us an idea of what is really happening in the life of the Messiah. It happened after this that Avshalom prepared for himself chariot and horses and 50 men to run before him. Avshalom would arise early and stand by the way toward the gate. And it happened when any man would have a dispute to bring to the king for judgment, because this apparently was their pattern. I'm not sure exactly how it worked out, but they would come before the king. It sounds like the story of Moses when his father-in-law, Yisro, there we go, boy. His father-in-law Yisro came, and he saw how many people were standing up before him. But this is something that kings do. Kings will wait. They have a certain time and when people can come to see them, and there are lines. And here comes people, now they have problems. Absalom would rise early in the morning and stand by the way towards the gate. Now understand that Avshalom was an extremely handsome man, gorgeous in every way. He was the star, the movie star of the family. It happened when any man would have a dispute to bring to the king for judgment, Avshalom called to him and said, "Which city are you from?" And he would say, the servant would say, "From such and such tribe of Israel." Then Avshalom said to him, "Look, your words are good and proper, but there's no one before the king to understand you." And Avshalom said, "If only someone would appoint for me judge in the land, and any man who had a dispute or judgment could come to me, I would judge them fairly." And it was that whenever anyone came near to him to prostrate, they would prostrate themselves before him. He would stretch out his hand and take hold of him and kiss him. Avshalom did this. I'm not sure how that sequence worked. Let me see. He says he would stretch out his hand and take hold of him. That's Avshalom. And then he would bring the person, I guess, towards him, and he would kiss him. So then it says Avshalom did this sort of thing to all of Israel. So he did this for a long time. He would come for judgment to the king, and Avshalom stole the hearts of the men of Israel. in this way. It happened at the end of 40 years. So here he means, and I looked it down below because I didn't think that he spent 40 years at this. At the end of this is really the 37th year, it says down below. This is the beginning, the 40th year of the monarchy in Israel, which begins with Shaul for 3 years and then David HaMelech for 37 years. That Avshalom said to the king, I would like to go now and pay my vow that I made to Hashem in Hebron. For your servant took a vow when I lived in Geshur in Aram, saying, if Hashem shall return me to Jerusalem, I shall worship unto Hashem. The king said to him, go in peace. And he rose and he went to Hebron. Avshalom then sent spies throughout all the tribes of Israel, saying, when you hear the sound of the shofar, announce, Avshalom has become king in Hebron. With Avshalom went 200 men from Jerusalem, who were invited and went along innocently. They did not know anything of Avshalom's intention to make himself a rival king. And Avshalom sent for Achitophel and Gilonit, David's advisor from his city, from Gilo, when he slaughtered the sacrifices. The conspiracy was powerful, and the people with Avshalom continually increased. Now, it's a little vague, some of that, but we see what's going. The bearer of news came to David, saying, the heart of every man of Israel has turned to Avshalom. David then said to all his servants who were with him in Jerusalem, arise, let us flee. There will be no escape for us from Avshalom. Hurry to leave, lest he hurry and catch up to us, and thrust evil upon us, and smite the city with the blade of the sword. The king's servant said to the king, whatever my lord the king decides, your servants are ready. The king left, and all his household went with him. But the king left 10 concubine wives to keep the house. The king left, and all the people went with him. They stopped at a faraway house. All his servants passed near him, along him with all the archers and slingers and the Gittites. 600 men who had come with him from Gath passed before the king. Now, what I'm thinking as I'm listening to these stories is that the king, either it's Avshalom in Hebron, who's now taking over, or King David, with all these men, you have to feed them. You have to have an army. You have to arm them. This he was able to do. The king said to Ittai the Gittite, why should you also go with us? Go back and remain with the new king, for you as an advisor and also an exile that is returned to your place. You arrived just yesterday. Shall I displace you today to take flight with us while I go for wherever I go? Return and take your brethren back with you. Your offer is kindness and truth. But Ittai answered the king and said, as Hashem lives and by the life of my lord the king, I swear that in whatever place my lord the king will be, whether for death or for life, there your servant will be. This is the language that people spoke in those days. David then said to Ittai, go and then pass ahead. So Ittai the Gittite passed ahead with all of his men and all the children who were with him. The entire land was crying in a loud voice, and all the people passing by. All the people were passing by. The king was passing through the Kidron Valley, and all the people were passing along the road towards the wilderness. Now, you're talking about the Jewish people, the servants of the king and his family and many others are refugees in their own land. He said, behold, Zadok and the Levites with him were carrying the ark of the covenant of God. So that he had He had the ark, and he took it with him. They set down the ark of God, and Abiathar came up as well, until all the people of the city finished passing from the city. The king said to Tzadok, "Return the ark of God to the city. If I find favor in Hashem's eyes, he will bring me back and let me behold him and his abode. And if he says, 'Thus I desire you not,' then I am prepared to let him do with me as he sees fit." Now here's what happened: is that the tzaddik, all of the Levi and all the Kohanim, which means the Levites and the Kohanim, they brought the ark up to David. They wanted the ark to go into exile with David, but David said, "No, take it back. It will be the place where it belongs. It belongs in Jerusalem." So he said, "Return the ark of God to the city. Then if that doesn't work, and if I'm not successful, and if I can't come back, then I will submit myself to Avshalom." The king then said to Tzadok the Kohen, "Do you agree? Return to the city in peace, your son of Ahimaaz and Yonasan, son of Abiathar, your 2 sons going with you. See, I'm remaining in the plains of the wilderness until word comes from you to inform me." So Tzadok and Abiathar returned the ark of God to Jerusalem, and they stayed there. David was going up on the ascent of the Mount of Olives. So I have an apartment that overlooks the Mount of Olives in Jerusalem. It's in a frontline zone in Jerusalem. David was going up on the ascent of the Mount of Olives, crying as he ascended with his head covered, going barefoot. So you have to imagine he's going east. He's going from the area of Jerusalem where the palace was, and now he's on the Har HaZeitim, which is on the way out of Jerusalem, going east. David was going up on the ascent of the Mount of Olives, crying as he ascended, with his head covered, going barefoot. And all the people with him wrapped their heads and went up, crying as they ascended. It was told to David, saying, "Achitophel is among the conspirators with Avshalom." And David said, "Please, confound the advice of Achitophel, O Hashem." David was approaching the summit where he would prostrate himself to God. And there before him was Hushai the Archite, with his tunic torn and dirt upon his head. David said to him, "If you pass over with me, you will be a burden to me. But if you return to the city and say to Avshalom, 'I shall be your servant, O king. I have always been your father's servant, and now I am your servant,' you will be able to nullify Achitophel's counsel for me. Are not Tzadok and Abiathar the Kohanim there with you? And it will be that anything you hear from the king's house, you will tell to Tzadok and Abiathar the Kohanim. Behold, their 2 sons are with them, Tzadok's Ahimaaz and Abiathar's Yonatan. Send them by their hand any word you may hear." So Hushai, David's friend, came to the city as Avshalom was about to enter Jerusalem. This is Baruch Fleischman. That's the Tikkun Elevator Kolo. We're listening to the life and times of our king, David HaMelech, David ben Yishai.